Hello, I'm so glad you joined us this evening. Today, we're going to talk about clinical trials. Clinical trials are research study that helps medical treatments and intervention in people to help them to make sure that the medicine that they take is safe and effective. These trials go on all the time, but sometimes we don't know about it in communities of color. Sometimes we hear about it, but we're skeptical of it because of the past, and rightfully so. But today we want to give you some information and some knowledge on clinical trials that may help you to feel more comfortable in participating in some of these trials. Because if you participate in the trials, then we'll know that whatever comes out of the trials and whatever helps people with their diseases will help us also. If we're not in the trials, we don't know that the medicine that is effective on us. So please listen and take notes, and hopefully you'll learn some more and be more comfortable with clinical trials. Autumn is here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my show. This is Autumn is Here. I'm your host, Francine Crawford, and today we're speaking to Dawndra Shepherd, who is the Community Outreach Coordinator for Clinical Trials. Dawndra, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Francine. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Well, thank you for coming on and wanting to share information with my audience. But first, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yes. So my name is Dawndra Shepherd. I reside in Queens. I live in Queens, New York. I have been in healthcare for a little bit over 20 years. I started out in infectious disease, internal medicine. I did a lot with reproductive science as far as IVF, as far as, IBF, IUI. Basically, it's very broad in that area as far as infertility for both men and women. And during the height of COVID, I worked in the lab as a laboratory technologist, conducting PCR tests for COVID. And now, for the last 3 years, I've been in clinical trials. Specifically, the main focus is clinical trials in mental health. I work for an organization called Richmond Behavioral Health, which is located in Staten Island, New York. We are under the umbrella of Evolution Research Group, which is an organization that focuses on CNS, which is the central nervous system. So we conduct clinical trials around dementia, Alzheimer's, any cognitive decline, and also basically every mental indication you can think of, from depression to bipolar, schizophrenia, OCD, anxiety, to name a few.
Okay, okay. Well, that's very interesting. That's a broad range of things.
Very much so.
Okay,
Yes.
so I met you at a Caring Kind Walk, and we there was a lot of things about Alzheimer's and dementia and things like that, and there were a lot of people who were representing that. Um, tell me a little bit about First, tell me a little bit about clinical trials. Exactly what do you mean when you say clinical trials?
Okay, so clinical trials. So for any medication, in order for it to be FDA approved to hit the market, or any vaccination or any laboratory equipment, it has to go through a clinical trial process. Clinical trials typically are phases 1 through phase 3. And sometime they will go into phase 4, which is an extended label or an open label. But before that, most all medications or drugs or anything is studied in a laboratory for 3 to 5 years before it is actually um, tested on human subjects. So in phase 1 of clinical trials, we typically test these on healthy individuals just who want to donate their time for the sake of science. When we get into phase 1 of clinical trials, we focus on a smaller group in certain populations. We're governed by sponsors who hire us. They are pharmaceutical companies that want to expedite the medication to hopefully to improve the lives of many through new therapies. So when you get into phase 1, it's on a group of people who actually have that indication. So whether it be cancer, whether it be a reproductive problem, and where my expertise comes in is mental health. So we focus on people who have those mental illnesses, and that's in phase 1. Phase two of clinical trials, we include more people in the population. So say for instance, if we have our site in Staten Island, maybe a location in Arizona or California, or even Europe or South America will also be conducting the trial at the same time simultaneously. And when we go into phase three, we're getting closer for the medication. We're seeing that it is working, and we tested on a larger population of individuals in the community. And again, this is not only in one geographic area. Say, for instance, I'm in the Northeast. This is happening down South. This is happening Midwest. This is happening in other organizations around the world. So when we see that the therapies for that the results have yield a good result in all of those phases, then the medication goes under review by FDA and then to the public, where you guys or anybody, even myself, has to take medication for any illness that they have.
Okay, so you're saying that regardless of what you're doing clinical trials for, they have to go through all of these phases. Everything goes through these phases. These are the steps.
These are the steps. These are the steps.
Okay.
And sometime I did mention phase four, which is an extended label in clinical trials to keep things fair, so there are no biases. Mostly all clinical trials are double-blinded, meaning that when a person is coming into a clinical trial, they don't know if they are going to receive placebo or the investigational drug to actually target that illness or the symptoms. So say, for instance, if you entered a trial and you did receive placebo, at the end of the trial, we unblind the individual and we tell you, hey, you actually received that medication or you actually received placebo. If you did receive placebo, you have the opportunity to actually take that drug at that time. So for a lot of patients, or B, if they actually like the drug that they were on, they have the opportunity to stay on the drug, although it has not been FDA approved, because they feel that whatever regimen they were on in the past, that medication worked better for them.
So they're allowed to continue it even if it's not
Yeah,
FDA.
if that's what the protocol calls for, every protocol is different, meaning that for the study that the indication is intended for or the disease, they have the opportunity to go into our open label. Some clinical trials don't allow, but some do. So it all depends on the sponsor, what they want, and the trial itself.
Okay. And why do you think these trials are important?
Well, these trials are important because, first of all, there is no such thing as one pill fits all. In the past, mostly all clinical trials have been conducted in places like where large universities like Columbia or or say, for instance, the University of Miami. If you lived in that area, maybe you could join a clinical trial because that area is highly populated and they have a university surrounded. But as we saw in the height of COVID, we were very remote. So a lot of clinical trials, they became more decentralized, meaning that we went into rural areas, we went into areas whereas, or populations that probably in the past, they were not offered the opportunity to go into a clinical trial. So we are more into diversity, inclusion, you know, to involve persons of different races, different ethnic backgrounds, different genders. And we try to, touch every community. It's important to do that. We just don't have the data or the science to support other backgrounds as much as Caucasian people have. Typically, most medications out here on the market, they have been centered around mostly white male Caucasian who have joined clinical trials. But we now know that certain therapies are just not working for people, whether you suffer from hypertension or diabetes, or anything. It's just, like I said, it's not a one pill that fits all. We need certain biomarkers, and therefore we don't have the data to support that. That's why it's very important to include different diverse populations into clinical trials.
Okay, so um, We have a lot of people who deal with caregivers, who deal with people with different things and different issues and different illnesses and things like that. One of the things is that when clinical trials come up in African American communities, people who have reservations, they don't
Hmm.
participate or they don't know about it.
Yeah.
Um, so what would you say to that?
I mean, it's very relatable and it's very understandable. We know that there is an area of mistrust in especially diverse communities, given past history, especially in the United States. Some things are documented, some things are not documented. And they're in different institutions. People don't feel that they are represented. And things have, pretty much we're on the highest totem pole as a person of color or as an African American person, of every chronic illness there is, whether it be cancer or hypertension or diabetes. So the bottom line is we need our own biomarkers. If we don't have the science to support, how do we know how to move forward in the future? So, to advance the best sciences out there, we must build trust and ensure that the studies include diverse populations and the treatments that work for everybody. We need treatments that work for everyone. And in the past, we just have not seen that.
Okay. So let's talk about some research that you may have or understanding of about dementia and
Mhm.
Alzheimer's. How have you worked on that?
Yeah, so I worked on a clinical trial with Eli Lilly. It was for a medication that targeted amyloid plaque in the brain. There was a simple biomarker that we looked at. So we all are aware of Alzheimer's. If it doesn't affect anyone in your family, we often know somebody that it does affect. And, it actually affects 1 in 8 people. So we know it's very prevalent. And we really did not have any medications that would target the amyloid plaque in the brain. So there was a certain blood test that we did for Eli Lilly. We looked at a biomarker called p-tau, p-t-a-u, p-tau protein, and it basically when you had that testing done, it would look at the levels and tell you if you were more susceptible to developing Alzheimer's in the future based on the protein. So if the p-tau was elevated at a certain number, then we would say, hey, these are your chances of developing this illness in the future, and maybe you would want to join the clinical trial for that sake. For yourself, or if you have a family history, we know that dementia and Alzheimer's is very hereditary. I just spoke to a patient this morning who told me her husband is going through Alzheimer's, but he had 3 siblings. All 3 of his siblings died from Alzheimer's disease in different stages. So we do know that it is very hereditary. We can't dismiss environmental factors. We can't dismiss the way we eat and take care of ourselves. Some of the ways that we can try to, keep a healthy brain activity is, eating is one component, but exercising, we all know that we need to exercise, but actually congregating with, friends and family, or just, have activities to do. Word puzzles are very good. Music has been very detrimental to those who have gone through the illness. It's a universal language. So those are some things that we can do to keep a healthy brain. And I always like to express the importance of having a healthy brain. People sometimes we don't think about that. There's such a stigma with mental illness in itself, but when you think about it, we talk about the physical appearances or the physical harms of food or not exercising or not consuming alcohol or drugs. But in the same token, we must pay attention to our brain health. It's just as important. It controls everything in the body. So we have to, if you're not, if you have a problem, or you're dealing with something, it's good to, if you don't have a therapist, talk to a friend about it, anything that you're going through. But it is we have to take care of our brain health
Okay.
better than what we have been. I can honestly say that.
Well, with dementia and clinical trials, have you seen what was any of the outcomes and results from that? Was it anywhere where they had better medications or more information? Like, what is the progress of that?
Yeah, so actually the clinical trial that I work with Eli Lilly, that medication actually was FDA approved.
Mm.
So it is on the market right as we speak. It's called donanemab, and it's one of those medications where it actually does target the amyloid plaque. So if you were to go, typically someone would, if they don't start out with a psychiatrist and they see um, you know, how to when they see that their cognition is going down, or a caretaker like yourself, or maybe a child or a sibling, when they notice that their loved one is going through any type of cognitive decline, it's good to consult with a neurologist. Try to get a baseline of where you are in that spectrum. Sometime, I know with RBA, we provide free memory exams. So if a person did find themselves wanting to know where they fit in the spectrum of cognitive decline, we would conduct an MMSE, which is a mini mental exam. It's something very simple. They do them in doctor's offices and at neurologist offices. And it's a questionnaire. And at the end of the questionnaire, we tally the points up and basically give you the findings. And that person can make that educated decision what they want to do with those findings, as far as if they want to follow up, or go to a specialist, or typically they would want to do something. The beauty of clinical trials is that one of the things well one of the great attributes of clinical trials is that we provide all testing is free. So whether some of the testing that I brought up to you as far as the biomarker for the p-tau protein, they're not specific to a lab that or a doctor's office, meaning that that test is not even on the market yet. So the beauty of actually going into the clinical trial is the new advances is actually getting those tests done. Or say, for instance, if you can't afford to have an MRI or a PET scan, but in the clinical trial, we are required to there are certain tests that we must conduct, and it's all included. We're not charging your insurance for it. We're actually more than often paying you a stipend for volunteering your time and becoming available for the sake of science. So again, most trials, they offer new therapeutic options. They offer diagnostic tests that may not be approved, that by your insurance company, that are very expensive, or you may have a high deductible. And also, and you get compensated in the same token. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So let me ask you, the test that you said, if you see anything that if there's a cognitive decline in your loved one, or if you're caregiving or your family member, you would take these tests. Now, I haven't heard of doctors just offering this. So are you saying that if you see it, you have to ask them? It's not something that's like part of your regular checkup
It
if you're
is
a
not.
certain age or whatever, nothing like that, right?
Nope, it's not. And, that's the importance of my role as a community outreach coordinator. This is why I make the connections with the public to educate them on other options that are out there. Or even doctors themselves don't know what trials are going on, or what's going on in their community and what they can participate in. So, not only are we educating the public, we are educating other healthcare professionals in the same token.
Okay. So you can just ask for those tests for your doctor from your doctor. If they don't offer it, you can just ask for them, and they'll be able to.
No,
No.
well, no, you can't. And this is why clinical trials are so important. Like I said, with that with that p-tau protein testing, which is a blood test,
Mhm.
it has not been tailored to an actual test that your doctor can order in a doctor's office. Or now you actually have the option of going on to like an outside lab for like LabCorp or Quest and actually ordering your own test, but that is not an option. These are only tests that are specific to the trials.
Mhm.
And that's the beauty of clinical trials in itself. These are advances in science that have not really hit the market yet for everyone, but it is for a smaller population of people. But the goal is to have more people of diverse populations join so we can have therapies that is, I would say, compatible to everyone's biomarkers is the best way I can put it. Because what may work for you may not work for me.
Mhm.
Or even if you have a sibling, you share DNA, but in the same token, you may have more of your mother's traits than your father's. And again, the medications are not created equally across the board.
Okay. Okay. So what as far as with people who are looking for different clinical trials and stuff like that, can you tell me if there's a certain amount of time? Do you do this for a month, 2 months, or does it vary depending on the clinical trial?
Yeah, it all varies. We have some clinical trials that are inpatient. Say, for instance, we're conducting a clinical trial for bipolar as we speak. It is an inpatient clinical trial in our office in Staten Island for 28 days. So therefore, that person would have to commit to those 28 days and be, I don't want to say constricted, but you are confined to that area of space throughout the duration of the clinical trial. But often clinical trials are on an outpatient basis and they all vary. We have some depression trials that we're conducting right now that are only a couple visits, maybe 6, but we have some that are a year long. So again, it depends on what the pharmaceutical company wants, what their target is, what they're trying to promote as the medication and in the process of that. So it all varies. You have so many companies out here that promote their clinical trials under every indication. So, and they all have different criteria as far as BMIs, who will be selected, as far as your history of, what medications you're taking or not taking. So, you know, people also have the misconception that clinical trials, you're being used as a guinea pig,
Mhm.
but that's not true. The screening process for clinical trials, it's a very rigorous process. Really, we want the science to be true because we want the medications to help people who are suffering from these chronic illnesses. So, um, we pretty much conduct a very thorough physical even before accepting anyone. And it's not up to me, it's not up to the doctor, it's up to that sponsor if that person is selected. And we're governed by good clinical trial practices. So everything, has a review. We have an international review board that has to go over every protocol. And sometimes they have to be amended because we are learning in the process. So if, say for instance, if a person joined a clinical trial, which I haven't seen this happen, and we see too many patients having an adverse reaction to that medication, then more than often the trial will come to a halt for that medication because we see that the results are not yielding what we want the outcome to be. We want the outcome, whatever medications that we are putting out there, to target that illness and hopefully be successful. We want people to live productive lives, and not not to be on so many medications at one time. I talk to so many patients and they're just like, I'm on so many meds and I'm not finding any relief at all, I work in clinical trials, but I'm a very holistic person. I like to promote healthy well-being is my first and foremost. Try to take care of yourself. You have to listen to your body. You have to have these preventative checkups. Don't go to the doctor at the last minute. So it's all about education and taking care of yourself. In the same token, I like to advise that you are your best doctor. You have to listen to yourself, and even with under the doctor's guidance, you should put your input into it. If you hear something that you don't want to take, or you feel something is wrong, question that doctor about it, or get a second opinion. Sometimes they don't get it right all the time. I can say that.
Okay. Well, that's great advice. Many of the people who are listening are either caregivers or caregivers to seniors, and sometimes the information is overwhelming when they go to the doctor or they get confused. And, it's
Right.
easier for them to go with them and just to write it down or ask questions and speak up,
Hmm.
your own advocate. So
You
that's
have to
great.
advocate for yourself. You have to. And that's in every aspect
Absolutely.
to
Absolutely.
navigate healthcare. Yeah, you have to.
Well, it's so important that one of the things that we are involved, that people of color are involved in some of these clinical trials because the results we want them to be able to work on us.
Right.
Also. So, what would you say to encourage people of color to seek out these clinical trials and participate in them? What would you say to
Hmm.
encourage?
Yeah, it's all about educating yourself. Sometimes people they don't know about clinical trials because um it's not being brought into their community. I
Mhm.
go into the community myself. That way I'm making that personal connection with those individuals, and sometimes they may not be receptive the first time. I've had people, sometimes it takes a year, for them to come around, and they'll call me and they'll say, "Hey, I remember what you said," or, "What you said resonated with me. And I've gone through so many antidepressants, or I've tried so many therapies, and this just isn't working. And I really don't have any hope left." So the goal is providing the hope, and if it's not necessarily helping you, you are helping your community. But the goal is to help that individual in itself. But again, it's all about education. Again, through your platform, people can learn about clinical trials this way. Um, I think over the last couple years, it has been more publicized than in the past. And I think more of diverse populations are coming around to accepting clinical trials because it's just being televised more. We have more people like myself out in the communities teaching. It's being offered in your doctor's offices more, or your psych offices more, your therapist, whether you're talking to a psychiatrist or receiving psychotherapy. So again, there's many ways. I like to go into the community myself. I don't care where it is. You can find out, community fairs, your doctor's offices, even if they are not aware, I'll go to them. I'll educate doctor's offices and they can provide resources, or many different platforms. You met me in Central Park at Caring Kind. So again, that's how we were connected. It's all about having that presence in the community, definitely.
Okay, okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here and giving us some insight into clinical trials and what you do. Thank you for the work that you do and the
Thank you.
community work that you do. I really appreciate that. And we need to just keep getting the word out and getting people more educated on this subject. And hopefully they'll be, more involved and
Right.
more participants in it so we can get some answers that will help us.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
goal,
yeah.
Francine.
So
Thank you.
thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking this time.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right, take care.
Bye.